Welcome to the Hollis Chapman Show, where we celebrate the power of words and the beauty of storytelling. Join us on this journey as we delve into the minds of successful authors and small business owners who have mastered the art of crafting captivating narratives that inspire, educate, and entertain. Prepare to be inspired as we explore the boundless possibilities that come from sharing stories and experiences that shape our lives and ignite our passions. Through heartfelt conversations and insightful discussions, we uncover the wisdom and creativity that fuel these incredible individuals in their pursuit of greatness. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let the magic of storytelling transport you to new worlds and perspectives. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and uplifted as we embark on this storytelling journey together. Stay tuned for an episode filled with wisdom, inspiration, and the power of words. Welcome to the Hollis Chapman Show. Say where stories come alive. Let's begin this adventure together. Don't miss out on the opportunity to connect with some of the most talented and compelling voices in literature today. Tune in and let the journey begin.
Our special guest, Ray Cline. Welcome.
Thank you, Hollis. Thanks so much for having me.
You're awesome. Hey, tell us more about yourself and your new book, ma'am. Tell us more.
Well, so one thing I think that's interesting about this book in particular, and me as a writer, is it took me 14 years to write Precious Ugly. I felt the character Clementine, she's 13, she's going through a lot, she's surviving a lot. I felt that she was speaking for so many women and girls, children, men, lots of people who are surviving domestic violence, surviving a lot of things in the world. And, I felt like I needed to be at my best in order to share her voice with anyone else. And so it took me 14 years studying craft and trying to get to a point where I was ready to let it off the desk. But yeah, so that's how Clementine and Precious Ugly came into the world.
Before we get to the cover, when you do this and do your research and you kind of dig deep into domestic violence, as you think back, was there sometimes we said, wow, I cannot believe this happened to this person like that. I cannot believe this happens in our world, our country. Talk about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Clementine does, I don't want to give too much away in the book, but you know very quickly in the first chapter what she's dealing with, and she's dealing with it intentionally, right? So it wasn't only the circumstances she was going through that really affected me emotionally as I was writing her and discovering her along the way. It was her tenacity and her resilience and her ability to not only survive but do it as much as she could on her own terms. And at her age, it seems incredible that 13-year-old children are able to be so resilient and to be such survivors. But my experience is as a person in my own lived experiences, but also having worked with teenagers, at-risk youth, mainstream, teaching for so many years, it's my experience that is the case. Children especially show incredible resilience in the face of terrible circumstances, and that's what I wanted for her. And so yeah, there would be days when I was full out bawling, like belly sobbing, and then there were also days where I was laughing out loud. Now I was laughing at myself, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But there was also joy in her perspective and joy in her experiences that were meaningful to me as well.
Outstanding. At 13, like you said, your main character, you don't want a child to grow up so fast. Let them be children, let them enjoy the things like that. But she did a great job. Okay, so Precious Ugly, you got to talk about that because I looked at it twice. What does that mean? What is that all about? So talk about the title of the book and talk about the great poster behind it. That's the cover. I just recognize that. So go ahead and promote that and say how that all that came about. Go ahead.
Yes. So Look, well, first of all, the title. So here, I'll just kind of put this up here. So the
Beautiful.
title, Precious Ugly, it's backwards on the screen.
Yeah.
It's this sort of fusion of this sort of tender beauty meets damage, you
Yeah.
know, and what is sort of fluorescent about life. And whenever you bring together these two seemingly opposite elements of what we live with every day, we all have, I think, precious ugly moments where, you know, there's some tenderness there, there's some beauty there, but there's also just a difficulty in that moment. And I think for me as a writer, it was when I started to recognize in life, in lived experiences and also observed experiences, when I was able to see both the precious and the beauty and the ugly and the difficult as part of the same kind of chiaroscuro effect. You know, it sort of gives you those shadows of life that make life meaningful and give you depth. And that's where I find interest in writing stories, is whenever we come to those moments where we can recognize the beauty that's kind of packed into the difficulty as well. There's a couple moments in the book where Clementine recognizes specifically, and she terms them precious ugly in the book, and she starts to relate herself to this sort of banner of precious ugly, for better or worse. You know, it has a real interesting quality to it, but it's also tragic in a way, you know, that a child at that age would see themselves in that way. But I think it's also relatable. I mean, being a teenager is so difficult to begin with for all teenagers, and then to have added issues. And I mean, without going into too much depth right now, I think there's a lot of added issues for everyone, especially in our country right now, that makes it even more difficult on multiple levels. And so that's kind of where the title fell out, from her specific experience and her ability to see both sides of those circumstances at one time, hold them together at the same time in her mind. And so when I was thinking about visuals for the country, or for the book, for the cover, I like the idea of her eye.
Yeah.
You know, obviously an eye is so reflective of everything, and then, you know, having sort of the river, the tear meets the river kind of imagery works really well for her. And you know, there are snakes in in the book. There are plenty of them. They not only create a very, very real tapestry for the landscape in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and spaces where I spent a lot of time growing up in Ohio, Appalachia, West Virginia, Appalachia. But also they have this sort of mythical quality
Yes.
within the community. And I think snakes do in so many different communities and different areas of the country and the world, that there's such a rich, again, sort of dichotic idea with them. They are very scary. I personally don't like to meet them up close, but I have great respect for their positionality in the world and what they do in ecosystems. And so, you know, they present another kind of precious, ugly part of our earth in
Yeah.
a way. So it felt like it worked together. But let me please give a shout out to the amazing artist who I fell in love with her artwork back in 2011. Her name's Lex Cavato, and she is just someone that I've followed for years, and actually have a few of her pieces, and have published her in Eckelberg, my literary journal, some of her work, and I just think she's absolutely fantastic. So I was ecstatic when she agreed to do the cover for
Beautiful.
Precious Ugly.
Oh, it's gorgeous. The colors and the detail is awesome. Very good. So good choice. Outstanding. Okay, when was the moment you knew you had to write your book? You put a lot of years doing things, you're working with the kids a lot and stuff like that. You see a lot of stuff going on. Was there a wild moment when you said, Yeah, I got to write a book. I got to put this down on book so more people can find it, more people can see, and maybe you can help somebody. You feel so emotionally attached to things when it comes to young people. You want to do what you can to help them. Was there a moment when you sit there and said, "Okay, let me write this book"?
So it's one of those books, I think, that for me, and probably every writer has that particular project. For me, this was the one that I knew I needed to write. And without making it too much about me, I did grow up in Appalachia, northern Appalachia. I was homeless for a very short time. I was in a domestic violence shelter for a short time. I grew up with domestic violence in the home. And then I ended up, going to school, getting a teaching degree. I had the honor and privilege of working with students over the years who also survived domestic violence and some of the other things that Clementine survives and goes through. And I think also, again, it was 14 years writing it, so there was a lot of socio-political shifts that happened that made it just start to feel really necessary for me. It's set in Reagan era. They actually live on a campsite in Harper's Ferry, and they're living in a campaign vehicle that was once a Reagan campaign vehicle.
Wow.
So there's a giant photo of his face on the side of it. The iconography is pretty thick. There's definitely satire working into it. And I wouldn't say that current administration has been named in the book, but maybe alluded to in the book a few times. But it's definitely working with where do these MAGA influences come from? And how did they originate? I mean, some pundits would suggest that a lot of the origination came from rural America that felt disenfranchised. And, I push back on that. I'm full-on liberal feminist as you could get. But I did grow up in the Reagan era, the very conservative rural kind of upbringing where Rush Limbaugh was like the best thing ever. That's not where I landed as an intellect or an artist or a writer or teacher. But I do see, I have a lived experience of understanding how those claims could be made, that there was a sort of disenfranchisement by rural America. For instance, the floods coming into Harper's Ferry and not having enough funding federally from FEMA, people feeling left out of the conversation, a number of those things. And of course, in the 80s, the AIDS crisis and the way that was handled federally. Of course, it was Reagan at the time who was making these decisions. So you could say, well, place blame where it should be, but it still was sort of the federal umbrella, right? So I find these sort of socio-political, socioeconomic questions really interesting, but I find them even more deeply interesting in how they affect very specific people, particularly Clementine, but also the other characters that we meet within the book.
Thank you for sharing such a personal about your life. Share with us and share with people listening and watching, how did Ray Cline, our special guest today, fight through it? How did you get the strength to get through it, to go to school and do what you had to do and then be in the position you are in now? How did Ray fight through it? Did you have a mentor? Did you have somebody you do talk to that you can trust and guide you out? How did you do that?
I was fortunate to have a few people along the way who took interest in me as a person. My mother brought me home to a trailer from the hospital. We started with very humble beginnings, but my mother was very education minded. She didn't necessarily know how to mentor me into the kind of education that she wanted for me, but she knew that it needed to get done in some way. So it's hard work, right? When you
Yeah.
come from humble beginnings, it's really hard work to overcome the hurdles, right? And of course, my hurdles are very different than what somebody else's hurdles would be. So I was very fortunate in a number of ways, and I understand that. Um, I think it was really my love of literature that brought me along. And this is going to sound very cliche for a writer to say, but the master storytellers that I met along the way, and I felt like it was really in secondary, the high school levels, where I started to read literature that was beyond what was typically given in schools at the time, right? When I discovered Beloved, by Toni Morrison, it changed the way I thought about voice. It changed the way I thought about how women could write about their experience, and of course for me, I'm just Little Miss Nobody, right, from Marietta, Ohio, Appalachia, Ohio. But to learn that such a great voice and talent, such as Morrison, was from Ohio too, and that she was writing a story that is so impactful and timeless and tragic and beautiful, and the language that she used was rural.
Yeah.
She was speaking real language that felt real to me. It didn't feel like an MFA, kind of version of language. And it changed what I thought literature was whenever I discovered her. And so that's when I knew that I wanted to teach literature, and I taught for years before I ever came out of the closet as a writer. So I really came to it through that love of literature. And then I don't know what got into me, Hollis. Honestly, it was a shot in the dark. I thought, you know what, I'm going to apply to a master's in writing program, and I was floored whenever Johns Hopkins took me, to be honest. And I started working with some writers who were incredibly talented and supportive. Richard Peabody being one in Washington, D.C., Alice McDermott being another, who was my first workshop teacher at Hopkins. And I mean, her prose is off the charts, surgically precise, gorgeous, all of that. And then I did the MFA at American University, where I worked with Dylan Perkins Valdez, Rachel Snyder, David Keplinger, just truly gifted writers and authors who were willing to give their time in a very meaningful way. You can have authors who are teaching, and they're good teachers, and they're amazing authors, but then you have authors who are writing and they're amazing teachers as well. And that is something I aspire to. That giving of self in that way is a true gift, and I was very fortunate to have some people who did that for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. What do you hope readers will get out of the book? What do you think you want most of your readers to get out of what you've written about your book and your story and what you do as a career?
I really hope that readers connect with Clementine's ability to find her voice and find her agency in her own life, even under extreme circumstances, even at her age, to find the moments whenever her voice can be heard and she's able to take action for her own safety and her own thriving as well. And I think that, there, again, we've talked about there's so many kids and so many adults who are surviving extreme circumstances, and it's so easy to give up hope. It really is, and it's so easy to be quiet and silent about the things that we survive. And I think right now we're in a moment with Epstein files survivors speaking up and speaking out. I think we're in a moment now where there's more outlet for these stories to be shared, and that we can be less scared
Yeah.
to be open about it and to voice ourselves. And I think that's huge. And I would hope that that continues to grow, and that survivors' ability to speak about what they've survived, not in a shameful way,
Yes.
but in a way that gives witness to, I started Jesmyn Ward's On Witness and Respair. I fell in love with her whenever I read Sing Unburied Sing. But the first essay, she talks about this finding a voice, and this aspect of respair being this sort of found joy, this fresh joy after feeling the despair, and coming from, some sort of tragedy or trauma or whatever it is, and that there is joy and love and all of that afterwards. And it really sings true to me, and that's what I hope readers feel whenever they read Clementine, because her journey really is ultimately about that moment of respair, I think. And, I'm like, thank you, Jesmyn Ward, because that's the word I was searching for. And she gave me a word. I actually didn't know the word before reading her collection. And I'm like, that's exactly what I think of when I think about my own lived experiences, finding those moments of respair. And that sort of joy, I guess, that can come from a life that is fully lived with all the beauties and the darknesses, and finding that space for yourself to be happy.
Beautiful.
.com.
You're talking to people who are going through some tough time. And I know when you start writing your book or going through your situation, there have been moments we wanted to just give up. 14 years. What do you say to people who want to give up? How do you help them keep on? I know it seems awful today, but tomorrow's a new day. You just never know. Is that what you say?
Yeah, I think one step at a time. In terms of writing, even if you find yourself writing a single line, that doesn't, even if it doesn't relate to the book project you're working on at that time, at some point it might, once you get to a certain point in the novel or the manuscript. I think it's just giving yourself space to do that one more thing, even if it's very minute, because it all compiles on each other, and then before long you've put together these really wonderful pieces that maybe they're messy when you first started them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves grace and space to be messy when we put it down, because it's a creative process. And give yourself a break and just go at it at your own pace. I'm not a person who says you need to write every day, though I am a person who says if I'm editing something that I've already written, that's writing. If I'm thinking and just jotting down a few notes, that's writing. So everything, all the energy you put into it in whatever modality you're using at that time, it's part of that effort going further. So it's all good. It's all good.
Outstanding. Yeah. One of the themes in your book is kindness of strangers. Was there one unexpected act of kindness that changed direction of life forever? Was there something you think back and one person, stranger to you, just kind of made you sit back and go, whoa, didn't expect that from this person? Share that.
Yeah. So I was surviving a difficult situation, and a complete stranger who was an advocate for survivors. She gave me courage and strength when I didn't have any left.
Yeah.
And the people who work behind the lines, who really selflessly give of their time and their care to help people who are in a severe circumstance, they are angels among us, truly. And then the other part of that is also, so that was sort of the very situationally based.
Yeah.
Then I also had a mentor when I was writing, and I was in program. I was doing all the right things, right, that you do whenever you're trying to grow your craft and everything. And I had taken an experimental writing course at Hopkins. It was being taught by Richard Peabody, and we had our first conference. And I just never had confidence in myself. And I think a lot of us go through life not having self-confidence for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And the way he spoke to me in that conference, when he was reading, stories are so very personal. It's very vulnerable, right? And the way he spoke to me, the way he valued my voice, and he recognized that I did not have confidence in my voice, and he called me out on it, and that moment was huge for me in terms of just valuing. And when you start to value your voice, you start to value yourself as a person as well, I think. And that was another moment whenever things changed for me a little bit in life, I think, after someone it was being seen. Yeah. I think. Yeah.
I'm reading a couple of the reviews, and as an author, as a beginning author, and you said you didn't have the confidence, you weren't sure, it's going to be hit and miss. But here's this one review from Jordan Ritter. Gorgeous, brutal, moving, precious, ugly. It's a powerful testament to human resilience. When you see reviews and you see something like that, you gotta sit back and go, oh, God's sake, okay, this is a good choice by me, and I did all right. How did you feel? What was it like when you started seeing reviews like that? Boy, it must make you feel so good and so vindicated for all the stuff that you went through to put the stuff down in words, right?
It really, it's a gift. And I mean, Jordan, his writing is amazing. American Men, the book is great. It's such a great book. It meant, I can't even begin to express how much that meant to read his blurb that he sent for Precious Ugly. It's, I'm one of those self-doubters, always looking for the other shoe to drop, right? I think if you grow up, in tough circumstances, you're always waiting for everything to be pulled out from underneath you. And maybe that's not a bad thing as a writer or an artist. Like, you always have to have that edge and always sort of be aware, situationally aware of what you're doing and always striving to do better. Jordan's words were incredibly kind and really hit my heart in a really wonderful way.
Outstanding. Ray, if you sat down with the younger self, the version of you who were living through some darkest chapters of your life, what would you say to yourself? How would you guide your younger self from there to now, because of what you've learned? What would you say to your younger self?
Well,
throw you off a bit. Sorry.
I've got everything in my head right now, and I'm thinking of a particular situation, and call 911. I think definitely is one thing. I think my character Clementine would tell me to do that as well. But and that's the hard thing. There aren't a whole lot of young characters that I've read since in my reading at least, where they find the strength to do that in the moment,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's true to life, because you when you grow up in circumstances and you're surviving, your worldview and your view of family and your view of your particular community is very much shaped by the forces in your life, right? And so it can take a lifetime to almost deprogram. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that so much of what occurs in Precious Ugly starts to feel cultish in a way, because I think in those circumstances it does feel that way. Whether it's, it's not Jim Jones level Kool-Aid drinking, but it has a piece of that in it. And I think even within a family surviving terrible circumstances, it can become cultish as well. And so you don't think that's even an option, when you're younger. But yeah, if I could just, fly back, through time and sit there with myself and say, it's time. You need help. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well said. Please tell us again, where do we go after the show to get your book and learn more about you? Where do we go?
Thank you. Yes, go to raycline.com. Happy to have you there. And you can buy the book at your independent bookseller in New York City. That's McNally Jackson, Books Are Magic. There's so many great independent booksellers in New York. And also you can go to Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, and Amazon.
Perfect. Finally, I know you want to help people. So for someone who's watching this interview who may be facing abuse, trauma, overwhelming hardship, what message of hope would you like to leave with them? What else would you say to a person who's going through some hard times?
Yeah, absolutely. So if 911 doesn't feel comfortable reaching out to, there are so many hotlines to help. And one particular that Precious Ugly is kind of partnering with, we're including a bookmark from, is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. If I remember the number correctly, it's 1-800-799-SAFE. And there's also a text that you can send the word begin or start to. And if I remember correctly, that's 88788. It's on my website. The thing that's really beautiful about shelters such as the Betty Ann Kroenke Center, where I spent a few days myself, or other shelters throughout the country, and also the hotlines, is that they are specifically geared toward listening to you and following your lead, and they are going to minimize putting you at further risk. So they're very aware of the risk it is to simply reach out.
Yes.
And so it's a safe space for you to reach out and talk to someone, feel seen, feel heard, and maybe start to make a plan that's going to make sense for you, because I think that that's one of the things that isn't thought of sooner for so many people who are going through tough circumstances, is that you can reach out to these hotlines to make a plan, and you decide when or if to act upon it. So there are safe spaces out there, and if you are going through something that you're surviving, or you know someone who is, please don't hesitate. There's no reason not to reach out to a hotline and just get a connection with someone who has seen it before, who has worked with other people who have been through it, because there are a lot of services out there, some really good people out there who just want to help and be that safe space.
Outstanding advice. Thank you so much, Ray Cline, for being here. You're awesome. We wish you so much luck with your new book, wonderful book. Keep on doing the wonderful things you're doing. It's awesome. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you real soon. Come on back anytime. The Hollis Chapman Show, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.